Now, once again, there has been a lot of activity in the world of the RuneScape economy. Thanks to some pretty massive updates like Varlamore the Rising Darkness, so many items have rocketed up or down in price, and a dozen new items have been introduced into the game. So we're gonna have a look at those, but let's start off by looking at an ongoing interesting thread line I've seen throughout the last couple of months, and that is botting in old school RuneScape and how it's been affecting item prices. Now recently, we've actually seen a lot of conventionally botted items shoot up quite a lot, and we can only assume that jagex has been banning a lot more bots behind the scene, or have been using different techniques, or have just been heavily focusing certain areas. So let's start off with a kind of insane one, and that is Zolver scales. For only the first or maybe second time in the history of the item, they have reached 300 GP per scale, which is triple what they were worth a year ago. If we look at the all-time view, they just hit 300 in September of 2022, but besides then, we're at pretty much an all-time peak. And when Zolver scales are expensive, so are the unique items. The blowpipe is up to, it hit 7 mil this week for a small amount of time. So getting one of the most powerful items in the game, actually a bit of a cost investment now. And same thing for the other items. The uncharged Toxic Trident's about 6 mil. The Serp Helm is also about 6 mil now. And that's kind of what happens when you peg the price of your unique items to something like Zolver scales. If Zolver scales go up, everything goes up. Now the volume of Zolver scales does seem relatively low compared to some of these big spikes where the price really did crash, but either bots have been getting removed at a very quick pace, or the majority of people who use bots have shifted over to other moneymakers. That's also pretty possible. In a very similar vein, Hueycoatl has also seen a very similar increase in its most iconic item, the Superior Dragon Bone, which are now up to 26k, which is actually crazy. That's doubling in just a few months. The cost of prayer has gone up a lot recently, and this one really we can see a significant drop off in the volume of Superior Dragon Bones. Compared to earlier in the year, where at their peak, or trough to the opposite of peak, there's up to 4 to 5 million traded per week. Now there's down to like closer to 2 to 3 million, so that's a significant amount less. And that is really what is driving up the price. Now, jagex has been really hard at work nuking bots here. I see why that has dropped the volume more than Zolver scales, because Dragon Slayer 2 is a much higher requirement than getting access to Zulrah, so it takes longer to rebuild here. Another one we've been tracking throughout the last couple of episodes is the Granite Maul, which peaked at 900k this month. That's insane. Literally for a while it was close to the price of the Abyssal Whip. Honestly doesn't make that much sense to me, even without gargoyle bots. That's just kind of wild. So Zulrah Hueycoatl, it looks like they're putting a lot of attention into, but if we switch over to some other pieces of content, it's not looking as hot. Blood shards have started to go down again. I mean, to be fair, they have been at an all-time peak for months now. Like, they've still only dropped to here, which is still significantly higher than where they were previously. You could also argue the addition of the Amulet of Rancor might be pushing the price of blood shards down, as more people just use the Rancor instead of a Blood Fury. Also, the cost of using the Blood Fury was getting pretty prohibitively expensive. 17 mil for a blood shard. You can only really use it at like the Coliseum. Like everywhere else, you're just kind of hemorrhaging money. So the price is definitely falling there. Enhanced crystal teleport seeds have dropped a lot this month, going from somewhere around 3 mil down to like, I think we're under 2 mil now. Yeah. Now this could be a return of bots, which is pretty likely, but there's also another factor in that being that the availability of crystal shards was increased pretty substantially across all the content in Prifdinus, which means converting crystal teleport seeds into crystal shards is not the only viable way to get them now, so that could be lowering their value a bit on top of an increase in botting. Another item that's interesting, the Voidwaker Blade. This thing has been crashing for a couple months now. It bottomed out earlier this year and had a big resurgence, and now is starting to crash once again. Now I think earlier this year they added in a requirement for Calvarion, that being the medium Wilderness Diary. But it seems like they have either slowly gotten around that or returned, because the Voidwaker Blade has been crashing very swiftly, going from 18 mil to 10 mil this month, and seems to be in a pretty consistent downhill trajectory. And another botted item that's falling a lot, the Teleport Anchoring Scroll. Once again, they did change it to make it less accessible by once again adding in a diary requirement. That did work for a while, but now the unique item from there does seem to be crashing as well. Now to me this kind of reads that while jagex is of course attempting to ban bots everywhere, they seem to be really focusing their efforts on a few pieces of content like Zalra or Vorkath. That, or just generally bot makers have decided that those two pieces of content aren't really the most worthwhile things to bot in 2024. So the biggest update in the last month by far was Varlamore Part 2. With it, we got a bunch of new items, mostly targeted at mid-level accounts or even lower-level accounts. We had the addition of the Hueycoatl boss, as well as the new Herblore minigame Mastery Mixology. And we even got more capybaras. Now, this cute little critter might look tech-savvy, but this silly capybara forgot one important thing. He hasn't protected himself online with a quality VPN, such as today's video sponsor, ExpressVPN. Using the internet without ExpressVPN is kind of like this capybara eating just a random mushroom. Sure, most of the time it's going to be fine, but you also might just start projectile vomiting across the Peruvian mountainside. Every time you connect to an unencrypted network, you're taking a risk, and the reality is it's stupidly easy to hack people in 2024. I'm sure everyone knows someone who's been affected by malicious attacks. I myself have been hacked multiple times, but with ExpressVPN, it greatly minimizes the risk of getting hacked on unsecured networks. It does this by creating an encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet. It's extremely simple to use and can be activated with just one click. One of my favorite features of ExpressVPN and one I use a lot is that it completely unlocks the world's media library. You can quickly and easily change your location to anywhere in the world and gain access to that country's Netflix library. Here in Canada, it's kind of limited, so being able to tunnel to either the States, the UK, or anywhere else in the world just gets you way more for your money. I would highly recommend giving ExpressVPN a try, as they're currently offering a pretty significant deal for my channel viewers. All you have to do is click the link in my description or go to expressvpn.com/flipping to get 3 months for free, or you could even just scan this convenient QR code. So definitely check them out, and thank you so much to ExpressVPN for sponsoring. Now let's start with the new potions, because they are arguably the most useful thing from the new update. We have the Prayer Regeneration Potion and the Goading Potion, which are created from the same secondary ingredients, so their prices are going to be kind of similar. Now these potions until a couple days ago were quite expensive, ranging between 200k and 300k per potion. Now these are very strong and do last a long time, but at those prices, to keep the effect active for an hour, you would need to spend about 600k an hour to either have the effect of the Goading Potion or the Prayer Regeneration Potion, more or less. But due to some changes to the minigame, which made the secondary ingredient Aldarium much more easily accessible, the price is flattened out at about 100k per potion. Now I'm very curious to see where it ends up at, because these are strong. The Goading Potion is just such a useful quality of life effect that you could use in so many places. The Prayer Regeneration Potion is incredibly useful at some high level pieces of content like the Inferno, and if it gets cheap enough, quite a few other places as well. Who knows, really this is gated by how many people want to do Mastery Mixology. The cost of Aldarium is mostly in time, so it kind of depends how many people are going to do that. I could see it falling further. Probably wouldn't get cheaper than 50k would be my guess, because at that point it's starting to become almost as cheap as just using prayer potions, but even at 100k, pretty reasonable. Now another interesting one is the Chugging Barrel, or previously known as the Pre-Pot device. This thing has fallen so much. It released at 300 mil. It was the first one sold for around there, 400 mil even. And that was because there was no way around it. You just had to do the minigame for like 20-30 hours on release. But now it's much quicker to do, and the price has fallen rapidly, and it continues to fall as well. It is, at the end of the day, just a quality of life item that saves you 4 or 5 seconds at a time, so it was never going to be worth hundreds of millions, but because they made the minigame a lot quicker, the prices are starting to fall. Now as for the Hueycoatl, the flagship unique, the Dragon Wand, has settled at about 30 mil, which is honestly still more than it ought to be. I think there's some level of speculation happening here that they're going to buff the Dragon Wand. At its current power level, it's only useful at like metal dragons, that's it. So it's really at this point only expensive because of the rarity of it, and with some assumption that it could get buffed. The Hueycoatl hide was absolutely wild to me. This thing went up to 9 mil a piece, which is crazy because to make the top required multiple of them, and that means the Hueycoatl top, which is essentially just a blessed hide top, was 20 mil for a while, which is insane. They did make the hides much more common, but they're still pretty expensive because they're new. I mean, I guess one extra prayer bonus could be handy, but I don't think they've fully settled yet. Now, although the Hueycoatl is a pretty low-level boss, all things considered, it did have a really big effect on a few specific items. Probably the most notable one is the Blood Moon armor set and the weapon. And this is because this kind of came out of nowhere. People assumed the Dragon Enter weapons would be good here, but pretty much nobody thought double-hitting weapons, specifically the dual Hueycoatl, would be the best weapon. So it shot up so quickly from 4 mil up to 14 mil. All thanks to the Hueycoatl. So tripling in price, and alongside it, the Blood Moon armor set went up a lot as well. The Blood Moon chestplate doubled in price. The tassets went up a fair bit as well. And more than anything, the Blood Moon helmet went from 900k to 9 mil, literally 10xing in value. Now the reason this one went up so much more is because previously nobody would actually wear the helmet, but you do in fact need all 3 pieces to get the set effect, which makes it best at the new boss. Now the scythe also has gone up a bit as well. It's hard to say whether this is due to a low-level boss. Generally, high-end equipment doesn't get affected as much because in the end of the day, most high-level players aren't doing this boss, but there is a pet, so there's always a chance. This month, the scythe has gone from 1.5 bill up to nearly 1.7 bill, which means it is quickly approaching the price of the twisted bow, and for the first time ever, we might have a new most expensive mega rare. As for the Dragon Enter weapons, they did crash pretty hard. The Dragon Enter crossbow dropped 20 mil right away. You don't use it at all, but realistically it's just falling to, the price it was a few months ago. The lance is used there, but still fell quite a bit, so that kind of just goes to show how overhyped these weapons were. And finally here we of course have the bond. Once again, always like to look at it every month. It has started to go back up again. The bond has softened a little bit going into the summer, but it's starting to shoot up again, and probably by the end of the year we're gonna have like a 20 mil bond. That's my new estimate. Don't ask me where I got that number from, because I just made it up. Anyway guys, hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, and I will see you next month to see what craziness happens in the RuneScape market.